Hello, everybody. I believe this meeting has started. We are going to give everybody maybe another 1 to 2 minutes to kind of get on this call or on this meeting and collect yourselves. So grab a drink if you have some lunch. Continue chomping away, and we will get started here very shortly.
Sounds good. Joel, we're going to talk about the swim today. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that swim venue in your background there?
All
In the
right.
middle of winter in Chicago. Looks pretty nice
I
though.
am yes. I've been brought in as our fearless leader Meg has gotten sick. So I am Joel Feinberg. I'm the RMM in the Midwest region for Ironman, and I do live in Chicago in the city. And that is literally uh, although if you go high enough in my place, you can see that is my view. So that is Lake Michigan behind me. For those of you that are from the area, and right off Ohio Street Beach is where all the triathletes in the Chicago area do their swim training and everything like that. So
Yeah.
not kind of the concrete jungle compared to other areas of the country. So
And did you get down for a polar bear dip this year, or do you have to break through the ice to get in the water still?
actually, we've had a little bit of a warm spell over the holidays, and first couple weeks of January were pretty cold. That's normal, and then now we've been in the 40s, and today's going to be in a high of 50. I think tomorrow's going to be a high of 60. So um,
Okay.
we're getting a little bit of a spell, so we'll take it. A warm spell.
Right. So triathletes in the Chicago area, after this presentation today, Joel will be taking you down on Saturday morning for a little open water swim and enjoying some
Yep.
of that nice water and
Little
weather.
little splash and dash we call it, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of us in the area will
Triple,
jump in
triple,
and do
triple wetsuit swim. Yeah.
well, it depends.
Yeah.
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 It can get warm in the
Yeah.
summer there. That's for sure. But usually it's a good mile swim. We have a turnaround and then everyone will jump out in the water and quickly do a
Yeah.
quick 5 to 10K run and
Yeah.
call it a day. So
Yeah. Well, isn't that the great thing about our sport, or all the communities across the country and people getting together and the different venues and just getting it done? I remember traveling to the Philippines with Andrew Messick, and one comment that stuck in my mind is he said, no matter what corner of the world we go to, it's all our people. They all have their watches and the technology, and they love the sport, and there's some biking, running. So it's pretty cool to hear about you there in Chicago as well.
yeah. Yeah, we have a very large community triathletes here in the
Mm,
Midwest, and I've been
mm,
in this industry for a long time, and it's been my pleasure to the last 3+ years working with everybody here in the Midwest, so and across country at Ironman. So, all right, well, I think we're gonna get started here. I know we've been kind of chatting, but everyone, I want to introduce you to Lance Watson. He is an IMU master coach. 30+ years of triathlon coaching and training. You're an Olympic gold medal coach, which is amazing, and have been part of the last 4 Olympic Games as well. So that is really cool. If you want to kind of give a little bit more intro, but obviously we love having you here, and I'm gonna kick it over to you to take this thing over.
All right. Thanks, Joel. Thanks for the kind intro, and welcome everybody to our Learning at Lunch series. And really glad that you could carve out the time to come out and pick up a few tips to help you on your way to an awesome Ironman 70.3 and triathlon season. I'm going to do a quick screen share here for you, and we're going to walk through a presentation. 1 second, please. Okay, thumbs up from our tech studio. Everything good? All right, awesome. Okay, so today's focus, I think, is a presser for a lot of triathletes. We're going to talk about the swim, open water swim, how to get through, if you're experienced, how to get through a little bit faster. Hope to shave a minute or two off your finish time through this conversation today. But I think when I go to a lot of these events and get up on stage and speak and meet people in the crowd, most of the athletes are thinking about how can I be a bit more confident out there, have really good experience, and make it on the dry land so I can get on my bike and do the part of the race I'm really looking forward to. Kind introduction by Joel. Thank you. I won't spend too much time here. He covered most of it. He said 30 years, 35 years actually coaching this wonderful sport. Ironman Master Coach, Olympic Games. I've coached a number of Ironman champions over the year, which has been really rich and fulfilling experience. I was one of the founders of Canada's National Triathlon Center as well, which is a nice legacy piece. It's still going. And as a result of those years, I was inducted into the Triathlon Canada Hall of Fame. My current gig is I am the founder of Life Sport Coaching, and I was amazed to do the math this year and realize we just celebrated our 20th anniversary as a coaching company. So we've been around this sport for a long, long time. And I'm also the head coach of the cleverly named Lance Watson's Tri Club, which is an online training community, which is training plans, and we get together and we train live together as well too. And we have a lot of fun. Okay, enough about me. So I'm going to talk about, first of all, freestyle basics. I'm not going to do as much of a deep dive on technique. We're going to talk a lot more about open water specific elements, but it's worth at least covering some of the fundamentals, because the fact of the matter is if you're a stronger swimmer, you're going to feel a little bit more confident in the open water. So the primary pieces of being a stronger, faster, more efficient open water swimmer or swimmer in general are body position and propulsion. Okay. So let's start with the fundamentals, and I'm going to break it into two pieces. We're going to start with body position. Okay. So when I think about body position and propulsion, body position is essentially streamlining your body, getting it out of the way so it's not actually hindering your flow through the water. We think about body position, we think about hydrodynamics, number one. And being hydrodynamic means that you are narrow and you are shallow. So you can imagine if you're swimming and your body position is like so, and you're dragging your legs through the water, that's going to be really slow. Okay, so you're deep in that case. You want your body to be shallow. If you're thinking about a boat, if you are a barge, i.e., you are wide and flat, you're not going to be narrow and you're going to be slower. You're going to have a wider wake around your body. If you are a rowing scull, long and narrow, okay, you're going to be much faster. Your wake is going to be narrower and you're going to be much faster through the water. So those are the basics of hydrodynamics and body position. So if we work our way through it, we think about your head. Okay, there's a lot of weight in your head. And if your head is up or it's moving around a lot, or you're picking up and down and sideways, there's a chain reaction through your body. If you pick your head up, typically what happens to your feet? They drop down. They will drop down. Okay. So when you're learning, and we'll talk a little bit about sighting later, when you're learning to sight, one of the things you really want to get efficient at is getting your head up, getting a look, and getting it back down in the water quickly so that your feet don't sink. Okay. The other one is shoulders. So we don't want to over rotate our shoulders. You'll see a lot of athletes, particularly newer freestyle swimmers, they're so concerned about getting air. They, number one, lift their head way up out of the water to make sure they get a big breath. And then they turn their shoulders a lot. And what they do with their opposing arm is they try and almost push themselves out of the water to get that big breath. So number one, you're dropping your legs, you're widening your body, but then you're also really dropping your arm down low and you're missing some of that catch. And we're going to talk about propulsion in a second. Okay. Hips as well. Okay. So we also want to make sure we don't over rotate our hips. Typically when you're rotating with your swim stroke, you're looking for about 30 degrees. 45 degrees is getting to be the maximum that you want to rotate. We'll see some athletes will rotate 90 degrees and get completely on their side. And typically what will happen there is shoulders and hips will disconnect. And that's when you get the hula dancer swimmer, or sometimes we call it the washing machine, where body parts are moving disjuncted. You're not streamlined, you're not narrow, and you're using a lot of energy. That's not helping you go faster forward. We talk about your butt staying shallow. So when you take your breath and you rotate ever so slightly, you should think about your butt cheeks basically just cracking the water slightly on that rotation. So that's a nice little check-in to make sure that your lower legs and your lower body are shallow enough. Okay. And then the last piece of your legs. So again, you want to keep your legs up nice and shallow, and you don't want to be kicking super wide. So sometimes we see athletes who come from a running background, and when they try and swim faster, they try and run faster in the water with their legs, and you'll see their legs really bending and flexing. And again, you're widening up that wake, you're creating a wider barge going through the water. And it's also causing disruptive turbulence under the water too. So if you think about your heels lightly cracking the surface, becoming a stronger swimmer, kicker can help you with the propulsion piece. But for most of us triathletes, especially because we're swimming in a wetsuit a lot, it's just learning how to get those legs out of the way, keeping them shallow, keeping them narrow, and maybe just a little bit of kick to help you into rotation. Okay. So now let's talk about propulsion as well. So we're getting our body out of the way, but now we're going to try and use our arms in particular to really pull ourselves through the water. I'm going to go through the different pieces of the freestyle stroke. Okay. Number one is the entry and catch. So I know when I learned to swim years and years ago, the stroke of vogue was called the S stroke, where you really kind of carved a big S. And we've since found out that's not super efficient. You actually just want to be anchoring your forearm in the water and pulling your body past that forearm, trying to create a paddle between your fingertips and your elbow. So avoid that kind of old school hyperextension. Again, we sometimes are so reinforced to get a long stroke. You'll see some triathletes really getting out on their side and almost kind of hanging out there for a second and really extending before starting their stroke. And you're losing momentum there. So part of swimming is actually learning how to catch water, propel yourself forward, and keep that body momentum moving forward. Okay. Thinking about the pull phase, now you've entered the water. You're getting into the top end of your stroke. Okay, high elbow. I've always joked, if you want to be a swim coach, you just need to know how to do one thing on deck, and that's go like this in front of a bunch of athletes, because you always see swim coaches trying to get athletes to get up and on top of that stroke nice and high. Again, trying to create a paddle, not from your hands, but from your fingertips to your elbows. I like to use the image of having a Swiss ball or one of those big exercise balls. And if you can imagine rolling your hand in over top of that ball and pulling that ball in and under your body without, dropping your elbow and letting it slip forward. Okay. The other thing about the pull phase is that a lot of times we need to pull with our arms a little bit deeper in the water than you might think, or you lose a little bit of spatial awareness when you're in the water. So sometimes it's hard to know actually where your arms are in proximity to your body and how they're moving. And sometimes if you ever see yourself on video, you're like, oh, I didn't realize that's what I was doing. I thought I was doing something completely different. But the water closer to your body is moving. The water further away from your body is still. So you're going to get a better anchor or contact point on the water if your arm's just a little bit deeper in the water, not too close to your body and moving past that moving water. Okay. Push phase and exit. So a lot of athletes, a lot of triathletes, adults learning to swim tend to exit the water with the bottom end of their stroke a little bit too early, and they come out somewhere around their lower torso, maybe their hips. Okay. Great little drill is when you're practicing freestyle. Every once in a while, just tap your thumb against your upper thigh, and you'll know that you're finishing your stroke long enough. Okay. And then the other thing is making sure that you get a little bit of wrist flexion and a little bit of push at the bottom of your strokes. You're actually pushing out the bottom of your stroke, almost as if you were going to push yourself up onto a tabletop with that one hand to make sure that you're getting that full pressure at the bottom of your stroke. Okay, recovery phase, the goal is relaxation. Relaxation, that's a new word, I just invented it. Relaxation and not misaligning your body. Okay, so interestingly, the arm actually does not travel in behind your body when you are on the recovery phase. If you're slightly rotated, your arm should follow almost a jumping jack plane, so coming up the side of your body. It looks like it's behind you because your shoulder is rotated into the water, and you're following that kind of opposite plane up the side of your body, okay? But you're not going to create any propulsion here, so the main thing is just to save energy. And then by kind of throwing your arm over a little bit or using a bit of momentum at the top of your recovery, you can aid with stroke rate too. So rather than sort of hanging out there and taking your time, put a little bit of energy into getting that arm forward and placing it in the water in front of you. The last piece here, propulsion, is stroke rate. As triathletes, we're very, very fit humans, and we're probably in the top 0.03%. And by using a little bit of stroke rate, you're actually bringing in a bit of the cardio too. So I find adult swimmers, when they're learning, they're always trying to be very, very careful in the water about how they place their hand, how they do with their arm. They're thinking, thinking, thinking. Sometimes you want to just, like on the bike and on the run, where you're always thinking about cadence. You just want to turn your brain off just a little bit and get a bit of rhythm and stroke rate going. So you spend a bunch of time building that stroke efficiency, but as you're getting closer to race day, start to incorporate a little bit of stroke rate as well. So just a couple of nice images for you. The one on the left, we talk about shoulder and hip rotation and alignment. And I don't know, can you see my cursor traveling around on the screen? Yeah. So if you look at the rotation of the hips and the shoulders here, it's created a nice long line down the body there. And then here you can see this athlete is creating a nice paddle here with the elbow to fingertip. Maybe the feet are a little bit wide, huh? But I do like that the head is nice and low. Here's a great shot of a catch, and again, trying to create that big paddle there, a nice high catching position, slightly rotated. So she's going to use the lat to pull herself and not so much her shoulder muscles. That's a much stronger muscle there. Again, look how shallow her body is, and I really like how narrow that kick is. And a great one here for head position. So after you take that breath, I always say you want to get your eyes right down on the bottom of the pool. If you can see where you're going, your head's too high. Okay. And again, look at that nice narrow kick again and nice alignment through there. Okay, so some nice pictures. I could spend hours going through video of swimming and I love it. We actually do that with our athletes where intermittently a couple times a year we have them send in video and we break it all down. And if you ever have the opportunity to get yourself filmed, it's just excellent learning. All right, let's get to the good stuff now. So I want to talk about freestyle fundamentals. Great. Any questions coming in yet? We all good there? Okay.
Actually, we do have a couple, and I think they're pretty pertinent for what you just went over. So,
oh, great, perfect. Let me have them.
Sure. First is do the fundamentals that you just talked about change at all with the type of water, i.e., lake versus ocean? And then how about, waves, water chop, things like that?
Great question. And I'm going to cover that in depth when we get to the open water portion. So I'm actually like that athlete is thinking down the same logic train I am. Let's talk about the fundamentals of swimming, and now let's take those skills and let's put them in the open water. So, but absolutely, those are skills that you want to be aware of when you're out in the open water. I will cover that in a minute for sure.
Okay, and then one other question, and I have a feeling you may hit on this down as we move through, but this is really more for wetsuits and first timers and understanding sort of when to use, a full length wetsuit, sleeveless, no wetsuit, whatever the conditions may call for that race week or race day.
Sure, absolutely. I'll cover that right now quickly because I don't have a specific wetsuit portion. So the first thing is wetsuit technology really has advanced over the last 10 or 15 years. And if you're sitting on an old wetsuit from 10 years ago, well, if you want to save money and it's still working, then keep on going. But if you tried on a new wetsuit, you'd be amazed at the mobility in the new wetsuits. So old days, it used to be like, yeah, maybe go sleeveless sometimes, feels better on the shoulders, that kind of thing. The new wetsuits are really, really good as far as having mobility and lots of panels and seams. Wetsuits are faster than non-wetsuits. So, anytime it's wetsuit legal, I would wear a wetsuit. I know sometimes when it's like borderline, it can feel a little bit warm out there. Then you might consider going to a sleeveless wetsuit if you're the type of athlete who overheats. I know a lot of the sort of pure swimmers sometimes like to go sleeveless because they feel like they can feel the water a little bit better too. But if you look at, Olympic Games and all the top, like that's sort of the cutting edge of like swimming and triathlon, or those Olympic triathletes. They're all, when it's wetsuit legal, they're all wearing full sleeve wetsuits. So it is a better choice. And then the other thing is you'll see some athletes will cut their wetsuits off just down below their calves, as opposed to going all the way down to their ankle. And that helps you with two things. Um, if you have a decent kick, having a really buoyant leg sometimes will take a little bit of that ability to just sort of drive your feet into the water and get a bit more kick. And a wetsuit that is sort of cut down around the bottom of your calves is much easier to get off than one that's right down all the way down to your ankles. It'll come over your feet a lot easier as you go through transition. My good question there.
Do you, and actually hitting on that, and I see this a lot, especially with first timers. Do you have any tips for breathing in a wetsuit and learning how to deal with the compression and whatnot?
Yeah.
Because it can be different, sort of all the way around with bodies of water and things like that. So anything
100%.
that you've come
Yeah.
across over your many years?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, it's just getting used to the feeling of having a wetsuit on. Like if you've never worn one, and if you're already feeling a little bit tense going down on race morning, and then you've got compression around your neck, and then you get in the water, it's a bit colder, you can sort of feel like, probably me even explaining that, a lot of you would get that feeling like, like what's that going to feel like? Um, I'm always amazed at how many people will arrive on triathlon weekend and they haven't practiced in their wetsuit yet. It's their first time out, or maybe the last time was at the last race and that was it. So the biggest and the most important thing is to actually get that wetsuit on and practice in it. You can swim in the pool with your wetsuit. That's totally fine. I've seen athletes swim short course yards and doing tumble turns and all of it in the wetsuit. So put it on. It changes your buoyancy. It changes your body position a little bit as well. And even though I said there you have really good mobility, it still takes a couple of swims to kind of condition your shoulders to feel really good in them as well too. So the biggest takeaway is practice. And then I'll talk about some other strategies around anxiety at the start of the race as well in a minute that apply to wearing a wetsuit and just in general being calm. Good to go forward there, Joel?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. So let's talk about race day, everybody. And for those of you who've been to 70.3 before Ironman, there's a familiar sight on the screen in front of you. And it's fun for me. We're looking at the back now, but I can see the woman on the left there. It looks like she's maybe praying a little bit that it'll be a good day. And different when you're a coach and you're on the sidelines there and you're looking around. I always really enjoy looking at the faces of the different people. Like some people are in the zone, some people are joking with other people. Some people look like they've seen a ghost. So gravitate towards your people. But as the great Mike Riley would always remind us, attitude of gratitude as you're heading down to that swim start, and really smell the roses. So let's just talk a little bit about race morning. This is before the swim, but the race starts with the swim, and what you do on race morning sets up your mindset, your general mind space for that, for having a successful, calm or faster swim. So a couple of basic tips. Number one, schedule your morning backwards from the race start. I'll often see athletes like rushing to get their wetsuit on 10 minutes before the race starts, in their closing transition. And that's not the kind of mindset you want to have right before you want to start your race. So work your way back a couple hours, figure out when you're going to have breakfast, when you're going to be getting in the car on the shuttle bus to the transition, when you're going to be checking your stuff, what time, 30 minutes before the race, you're going to be putting your wetsuit on, 20 minutes before the race, you're going to be walking down the water's edge. And, not only does that help you keep you organized, but it gives you a sense of like, I actually have an action plan. I know what I'm going to do on the morning, and it takes a little bit of the X factor out also when you're going to warm up. Okay. I always say have a regroup or refocus strategy because, inevitably you go on race morning, you walk into transition and it's exciting, but there are a lot of people there that like this is their goal. They've put all their energy and time and and they're nervous, and that can land on you in different ways. So if you find yourself, the jitters are coming up, take 10 deep breaths. Maybe you've got your music you like to listen to keep yourself calm. One of the best things you can do that help you come back from nerves is to warm up. And warm up will help you perform, but it's also a great safety thing too. Not all swims venues allow you to warm up before the swim for various reasons. It might be logistics, safety. Sometimes it's still dark almost until the start of the race. But for sure, 45 minutes to an hour before the race in 70.3, just even if you're in a hot climate, just get out for a 5 minute, 10-minute jog and just get your heart rate up just a little bit and your blood moving. And you'll find that helps the nerves a little bit. It also gets you going to the washroom at the right time, which is another thing you need to add to your schedule. Um, and then anytime there's opportunity to warm up for a swim on a race course, I absolutely recommend that you try and get in the water 20 minutes or so before your race start. Swim a few minutes easy, just get oriented, get the lay of the land, look back at the start area if you can see it, and just try and relax. And then even do a couple of little activations, a couple of little pickups, again, to open up arteries, to get your stroke going and that. But you don't want to go from, you know, 60 beats a minute to 160 beats a minute for the first time of the day at race start. You want to make sure that your body has already been activated, and then it's less of a shock once you get going. And then back to that picture I just showed you in the last slide. Um, you know, quite often when I do a lecture at these Ironman events, and everybody's sitting out there, and I'll put my I'll call out to the crowd and I'll say, okay, if anyone who is nervous about the swim today, put your hand up. And I'll say, hold your hand up. And you look out into the crowd, and 80% of the group have their hand up. And then I have people look around, and that brings a sense of peace. Like we're kind of all in it together on race day. And most of the people just want to get through that swim and get to their bike. And that can provide you with a little bit of peace when you know that, these are actually the kind of people, they all do the same stuff you do. They like doing the same stuff that you do. They all signed up for the same adventure you signed up for. And 95% of them are just like out there like you and just want to have a smooth run of it. So when you're standing in that start corral and you're waiting or whatever, like find the person with the smile on their face and connect with them, and know that you're in amongst friends on race morning. Okay, race start. I like to really focus on the race start. You know, from a performance perspective, it can really impact the outcome of your swim. From a experiential perspective, it can really impact the outcome of your swim. So, first thing I always tell athletes is spend some time the day before the race, not on race morning, whenever possible. Scout the start and the finish. Okay. And if you can get in and swim, even for 10 minutes the day before the race, it makes a huge difference. In this picture here, you can see it's a beach start. The athletes are being, funneled going forward a time. So I would hope those athletes had spent the time maybe just walking into the water and getting a sense of how the beach grades off into the water and when they should actually dive in and start swimming. Having a sense of how much space you have as well. If you're going up a channel, if you're in a river, if it's a wide open lake, if you're going out into the ocean. So having a good sense of, where you're going to go and what you're going to do by testing it out. And the same thing is with the finish as well, just, seeing how you get out of the water. Seed yourself properly. That's really, really important. And we see a lot of athletes who misseed themselves for different reasons, whether it's they overestimate or underestimate their ability. Sometimes we'll have athletes like, I better get up to the front because I might not finish on time. It really impacts your experience if you're at the right level of swimmer. Okay. And that's not just like, it's been a good sport for sure, but it's also like from a performance perspective. So if you are, say, a 36-minute 70.3 goal swimmer, and you want to have your best swim, well, get in that group, but try and get yourself a little bit closer to the front of that group and close to the back of the next group up. And the reason for that is you're going to be in and around people who are maybe at that 34, 35-minute range. You might have an opportunity to get in with just a little bit of a stronger swimmer and get total. But if you go too far up, if you're in there with the 29-minute group, like you're going to have people just coming by you constantly. And the people you're with are going to be out of here. So as far as, finding a great draft, but also as far as just like maybe getting bumped and knocked around and that kind of thing. And the same thing goes for if you're a timid swimmer, you're like, I'm going to go all the way to the back. Well, again, if you're that 36, 37-minute swimmer and you're back there kind of with the 45-minuters, you're probably going to be coming into breaststroke and a little bit more groups of people and that kind of thing. And that could be really disruptive to your comfort level. And it's probably going to slow you down too, if you want to kind of have your best event out there. So make sure you figure out where you're going to seed yourself and seed yourself properly. Okay. The other great thing about the corral at the start is, unless you're like top 5 swimmers or something like that, which probably, if I looked at all the people on this call today, it said who's going to lead the swim in the next race. There might be one or two you put your hand up, but the rest of you are gonna be like, not me. So when you're sitting in that corral, you can actually kind of look ahead. You can take a few breaths. Like I said, know you're with your people, kind of soak up the vibe. Like I get to be in this incredible event today that I'm going to remember for the rest of the season. But you can also look forward and you can see how things are panning out with the people going off in front of you. And you can see if there's where things are getting a little bit more congested or things have a little bit more space. Okay. Typically, I'm going to give you an example. If you're standing on the shore and you're looking out and the buoys are on your right and the first turn is on your right, most people instinctively are going to start right or gravitate right towards those buoys. So if you want to perform, then you want to be by those buoys because you're going to have more opportunity of being in around and getting in a little group of swimmers and having the opportunity to draft and swim faster. If you want to have a smooth ride of it, your goal is just to get through the swim as smooth as you can, then in that case, you'd be like, I want to start on the left or the bottom corral here in this case. And as everybody maybe instinctively funnels right, I'm just going to stay out here to the left where there's all this space down here, for a little while. And I am just going to do my own thing. I'm going to chill out here and just get into a nice swim rhythm and enjoy this open water. Okay. So starting for comfort or starting for performance, there's nothing in the rule book that says when that gun goes off, you have to go like, it's the Olympic 100-meter dive start finals in the pool. If your goal is to get through that swim comfortably, you should think about that same level of effort you might have if you're going out for an easy jog. Okay, so you're just going to go out for a jog in the water. You're going to get your face in the water. You're going to start making sure that you exhale and you breathe. And you're just going to take your time and get those arms going in a nice, smooth manner. Now, if you're an experienced swimmer, maybe you swam in college or high school, you've been doing triathlon for a long time, what you do in the first 200 meters can really impact the performance of your swim. And typically in that case, I would encourage you to train and prepare to start that first 100 meters a little bit faster than your average race pace. Okay. And the other thing too is not to sight too often. You see that last bullet. So you want to start strong and you want to keep your head nice and low. And you want to think about, how do I swim? If I was swimming a really good 200 in the pool, how does my body move? And you're not worried about getting lost in that first 200. Like you're not going to go off course in that first 100 meters or 100 yards anyway. You're going to be fine. But the most important thing is to swim well. And then as you move through 100 to 150 yards, then you're taking a little peek and you're seeing, okay, any groups forming? No, not yet. Head back down, swim for another 25, take a peek. Okay, I group over there. Now I'm going to edge over there. And I'm going to try and find that set of feet that I really have to work hard to keep up with. Okay. If you're well trained in the swim and you're an experienced swimmer, you can almost race the swim independently of the rest of the day. You can really push that swim and swim it strong the entire way. Now, you don't have to sprint in at the finish, of course, but getting out and finding that good draft can make a difference of 1 or 2 or even 3 minutes in your 70.3. Okay. Another little trick there is if you like to breathe right, say you're natural as you like to breathe right, and you have the luxury, keeping the person you're trying to keep up with on your left is a good trick. And the reason for that is you might be swimming. It's actually faster for you to swim on somebody's side, beside their kind of hip, than it is to swim behind them, directly behind them. So if you're breathing right, you can actually pop your head back down and you can peek and you can see them on the left underwater. And that way you're not constantly looking for where's the feet, where's the feet. You're getting your breath, heads back down, and you're like, okay, there's my set of knees. I'm trying to stay beside you. You're being a gracious sport. You're not bumping them and you're not whacking them, that kind of thing. But it's a really great way to keep your head positioned low, have your regular breathing pattern, and then be able to keep up the draft without having to pick your head up and look around a lot.
Hi, Lance. Real
Mm,
quick, couple questions because we're kind of right in that
mhm.
point where at the race start, and some of the questions I think would be
Sure.
pertinent at this point. First, and we can all kind of answer this, but Lance, I'll let you. We're talking about seating, and you just mentioned, where to put yourself properly. And a lot
Mhm.
of our races here at Ironman are self-seating.
Yeah.
Um, and the question is there signage to assist people,
Yes.
especially first timers, with, making sure that they're in the right
That's
group?
a great question. And first of all, I will tell you that these events are very well organized. And on race morning, it'll be really obvious where you go. Like I've been to so many different races, they all have different setups, and it's really obvious where you go. And there are big signs that have a 5-minute time gap bracket that are spacing athletes out in groups through as you go back through the corral. So I'm not sure I get the numbers exactly right, but usually there's like a under 29 minute, and then there's like a 30 to 35 minute, and then a 35 to 40 minutes. So it's usually in 5-minute gaps or ranges. So it gives you a bit of a a choice of where you might go. And again, if you were like you want to be just calm and in with your people, go to the middle or towards the back end of your time corral. If you want to challenge yourself a little bit, then try and work yourself to the front of your time slot.
And then as we start the race, and again, it seems like we have a fair amount of first timers here, which is great.
Mm,
Um, Talk to us a little bit about sort of that initial getting into the water, especially when the cannon goes off.
yeah.
How do people sort of center themselves and sort of get themselves to the center point of not in a panic mode? Because
Yeah.
even veterans, sometimes just have an off day and a panic happens. And I think that's a big question that comes in. So talk to us a little bit about sort of how you and
Get
your
yourself in the
experience and
right
all your athletes center
headspace.
themselves as they enter the water and the start happens.
100%. 100%. Um, Great question. I'm glad that came up. So again, number one, having that race morning plan keeps you calm. Warming up keeps you calm. Breathing when you're in and around people in the corral helps keep you calm. Knowing you're with your people helps keep you calm. But as you work your way down to the water, you know, um, then reality kind of kicks in. So again, not starting too fast, making sure that you breathe. Those are two real big keys. Taking your time, but spending some time the day before and actually visualizing where you want your head and your heart to be on race morning. So think of your own best self, your own strongest self, your own most grounded self. Maybe it's in another element or context within your life when you're where you're stronger, it's in your corporate world or, at the school or whatever, but some framework or image of yourself that you can sort of mimic and copy and bring with you to race morning and thinking about how you handle yourself in other environments where there's a little bit more tension and how you regroup. And then the other thing I really like to simplify it for athletes too, when they get in the water, and if that little voice starts going, that
Yeah.
dumb it down. And I mean, dumb it down. I'm like, you just got to get into a mantra and go left arm, right arm, left arm, right arm, left arm, right arm, left arm, right arm, so that none of that other, stuff starts to percolate in your head. And And you know what? The next slide I'm going to talk about is navigating the course and having now the bottom point there. I'm going to go straight to that. What do you do if you get anxious out there? So, again, mentally preparing, but then also having an actual action plan for yourself if things get really nervous. Okay. So if you're in the middle of a group of people and like you can feel that coming on, because usually you can feel it coming on, like, oh my God, this is terrible. Oh my gosh. Um, Take a second, try and get yourself to the outside of the group, just a few strokes, work your way out. And then if you need to roll over on your back and breathe and relax and catch your breath, that's a good strategy. Most of the races, if not all of them, you correct me on this one if I'm wrong, Joel, have like a raft, like a safety raft or something you can go and stop and take a break and regroup as well too. So you may not even need it, but sometimes knowing it's out there can give you peace because you know that there's people in boats, on paddle boards, a safety raft, all out there keeping an eye on you to make sure that you're going to be okay. And yeah,
Yeah, you
yeah.
you are allowed to we do have lily pads where people can
Hmm.
stop their swim and rest, but they absolutely
Hmm.
cannot move themselves forward. Same thing with our kayaks and boats in the
Hmm.
water. Everybody and anybody is allowed to rest and sort of
Hmm.
collect themselves, and but they are not allowed to propel themselves moving forward. So keep that in mind.
Well,
But
that was
yes,
yeah.
absolutely,
There goes that strategy of hanging onto the back of the kayak and just getting a tow. I mean,
exactly right.
guaranteed personal best, right? No, I'm glad that came up. And it's. I mean, there's pro athletes who have moments out there and get anxious. I think Lionel Sanders was talking about that recently. So you just got to know that it's normal, but try not to be too hard on yourself. And again, really visualizing yourself being in that environment, be as realistic as you can be. Don't kind of go to the race and say, I hope it doesn't happen. Think about it, what if this happens? How will I manage it to the best of my ability? First of all, how will I try and catch it early and have a mantra or a regrouping strategy? And secondly, if I get really anxious, how am I going to take care of myself out there and work my way to safety and know that there's help out there as well? Okay. Okay, so navigating the course, I spent a lot of time talking about the start because so much happens in the start, and um, you know, a lot of athletes who DNF the swim within the first few minutes of the swim because of that anxiousness. So having a good strategy for you to get out into that swim safely and effectively is super important. But once you're out there, talking a little bit about pacing and segmenting as well, I like to encourage athletes to look out. One of the great things is those big buoys. And most of the races are placed every 100 meters. So you can actually kind of break the race into smaller pieces. I don't typically encourage athletes to break it into 100-meter pieces, but you might break it into 400-meter pieces or larger chunks. You can also look at the course map because every course is a little bit different, and you can think about where you're going to be at certain times and focusing on taking it one section at a time just to keep yourself on task. Okay. um, Pacing is a big part, starting out strong but not too fast. You don't want to put so much lactic in your arms and body that you have to really back it off and slow down and try and regroup and be out of breath. Um, but on the other hand, when you get into the middle of the swim, sometimes athletes start to go on a little bit on autopilot and in la la land and that too. So if you are trying to perform at a little bit higher level, thinking about keeping that steady, strong stroke rate, point number two, and mentally being ready to keep a little bit of the rhythm and the pace on throughout the swim. Usually what I see with most athletes is they start strong and then they kind of slide into autopilot a little bit. And then that last 400 meters or so, they're like, oh, the horse heading back to the barn kind of thing and picking it up, heading back home. So try and keep it even throughout. Um, Sighting. So there's a question earlier about chop, waves, current sighting. So first of all, sighting, most triathletes tend to oversight. We all like to be masters of our own destiny and which way am I going, what's going on here and that. It's nice to have a check-in every once in a while and see like how far into the swim I am. So you're appropriating your energy and keeping things paced out nice and But typically, if you're not leading the swim, if you pick your head up and you look forward, and if you can still see swim caps, just keep going. Put your head down, just keep going, and don't look 3 or 4 times. Don't stop and breaststroke and look around. Unless you need to do that to center yourself, put that head back down and just keep going. Um, and again, after you take that look, drive that head back down so you get those legs back up too, and practice that in the pool. You can practice swimming a length, pick your head up, look at the dive block at the end of the pool, and get that head back down, and try and get very efficient at incorporating that into the rhythm of your freestyle rather than having it break up your freestyle. Okay. I talked earlier about stroke rate. We measure cadence on the bike. We tend to pay attention to stride rate on the run. We forget about that in the swim. So if you're swimming in chop, especially or into a current, maintaining a good stroke rate is really important for keeping yourself propelling forward. If you're in choppy conditions, trying to get that nice big sort of Michael Phelps extension, like you're in this beautiful smooth pool, it's not going to work as well out there. And if you're in waves, and sometimes if it's rolly and you go to take a look, it's hard to see. So try and first of all take a playful attitude to that environment. And then when you feel yourself just coming up a little bit and you're getting up the top, that's a great moment to take a look and see where you are, as opposed to down, taking a look and there's a little bit of a wall of water in front of you there too. So try and be a little bit, tactically smart about that. Um, if you're swimming down current, you can stretch your stroke out for sure, ride that down current a little bit. If you're swimming into a current, you have to rely on stroke rate a little bit more. If you're swimming into cross waves, it's really good to practice in the pool, learning how to breathe on both sides so that you can breathe away from chop and it doesn't impede your airway. Okay. And then just some other things too, fresh water versus salt water. Salt water, you tend to be a little bit more buoyant, and you can feel that. It doesn't really change the way that you swim. Just know that it might feel a little bit different. And definitely, if you're swimming salt water early in the bike, make sure you get some water in just to sort of dilute things down a little bit because you might swallow a bit of salt water out there. Drafting, I was talking about that a little bit earlier, and drafting is more advanced swimmer. You're trying to go a little bit faster. So if you think about the shape of a wake, and earlier I was talking about a rowing shell versus a barge. So if you're two athletes and you're swimming side by side like this, and you're having this drag race, it creates a big square wake between the two of you, and you're actually slowing each other down. And sometimes you see that athletes start racing each other, whatever, and they're actually slowing each other down. And I'm just going to give you this information so you have something in your toolkit and you can think about making decisions out there. So if there's two athletes, the fastest way to swim for two athletes is head to toe to head to toe. Okay, that's the longest, narrowest wake. Okay. If you are the second athlete, this is and you guys are about the same level, this is the best place to be for the two of you to swim fast. Okay. If you're having a hard time keeping up, it's better to actually be offset, and beside this athlete's hip. It creates a little bit of a wider wake, but you get more draft from that athlete if you're off to the side. Okay. So again, if you are trying to have that breakthrough, and this is just, this is all within the rules and not being a bad sport or anything like that. But if you're trying to have that breakthrough swim and starting a little bit stronger than your average pace, and then trying to find a group and kind of getting into the more of that Canada goose formation, of the big triangle versus side by side or head to toe, might help you keep up with a slightly stronger swimmer throughout the swim. So just keep that in mind. We'll also talk about turns, the turns for safety and for performance. So I always really like to remind athletes to think ahead. Think ahead. And by that, I mean, don't suddenly arrive in a situation and like, oh, here I am, and what do I do next? And that applies to the turn. So when you're 100 meters out from a turn, especially if it's a 90-degree turn or a sharper turn, if you take the inside or the tighter line, that's the fastest line. It's also the roughest line. Okay, so if you are okay with a little bit of contact and you want to get through that turn faster, then you probably want to be thinking, okay, I'm just if I'm just behind this person, I want to move up just a little bit to give myself a bit of buffer zone. And I'm going to try and stay towards the inside through that line. And I'm okay with getting bumped a little bit. On the other hand, if you want to have a smooth run of it and you just want to have a really clean swim, again, think ahead and like, okay, a right hand turn's coming and I'm on the inside, the right side of that athlete. I've got 100 meters or so to get myself to the outside, and I'm going to swim it a little bit wide. It's going to be a little bit further. You know, 20 seconds at the end of my swim, 20 seconds on my day in the 70.3, it doesn't matter, versus maybe getting bumped around a little bit. So I'm going to come in wide where there's space. I'm going to swim just a little bit wide, and I'm going to be fine with just having to cover just a little bit more ground. If you ever watch an aerial view of a group of swimmers coming into a turn, it reminds me of those aerial views of a Tour de France pack coming into a turn, where this group comes in and they come out of the turn and it all singles out and stretches out single file or two abreast. So you've got the compression part, but then you've got the extension part as you come out of the turn. Now, if you've worked really hard for 1,000 yards, 1,000 meters, sticking with your group, you got that sweet spot draft, and then you're not paying attention, you could lose that nice group you worked so hard to stay with. So always think about making sure you're right there with the person. And when you come out of the turn, it's like starting the swim. Try and keep your head down for 5 or 10 strokes, get up to stroke rate rhythm, get up to speed, and then take a peek and make sure, but not looking as you're going through the turn. Okay. One last point around sportsmanship. The one thing you never, ever should do as you go through a turn, and that is the ninja whiplash breaststroke kick as you go through. That's pretty tough if you start breaststroking and other people are trying to swim around because suddenly you're wide and you're kicking those legs out. So swim wide, get around the turn, and then if you need to, breaststroke and have a look, that's fine. But make sure you're in your space, but not in the middle of the turn, because that's a high contact point. Okay, swim exit. Talked a little bit about that, but I always lecture this at races, and I always see it anyway, and I think it's actually kind of fun and funny. But most of us we're so anxious to get to dry ground that the very second you can get one tippy toe on the deepest part of the water, you stand up and start wading to the shoreline. So you should swim until your hand can touch the ground. And that is the most efficient way to get out of the water. At that point, you'll stand up, you'll be about knee deep, and you can actually get your legs going and get moving. But sure enough, if you're standing on shore watching people fin, you'll see them at neck deep and they're all kind of wading in, and that's fine. If you want to have a little while to celebrate and have fun out there, maybe you want to be in the water a little bit longer, that's okay. But just know it's faster to swim until you can touch the ground. And then as you come out of the water, I like to encourage athletes, just put the goggles on the forehead, keep your hands free so you can get yourself balanced out of the water. And then if you have time to start working your wetsuit down as you're running towards transition, your hands are open. And then just before you get to your spot or the change tent, then it's cap and goggles off at that point. Okay. And I talked about being anxious. Any more questions there, Joel? Should I carry on?
Actually, there is one, and what I'm trying to do is trying to keep it pertinent to what you've kind of gone over. So we're talking about the swim, and then middle of the swim, in the water, and a couple questions, and this is going to be more of a technique question. And Meg actually posted, Lance, all of your information. So folks, if there's a question that you had that may not have been answered or answered the way that was pertinent to you, please reach out to Lance, and you can schedule that 30-minute time, and you guys can kind of go through it. But in terms of breathing in general, and one of the things that I really focus on when I talk to people is I work with I talk to a lot of beginners, people that are doing this for the first time, and just have a ton of questions. And so, do you breathe through your nose or your mouth or both? Again, it's all about technique and kind of getting used to it. But what are some things that you see through all the coaching that you've done, and what is best with the athletes you work with?
Okay. So first of all, breathing is good. That's a good
Yeah,
start.
we'll start there.
Um, yeah, yeah. It's amazing. Sometimes I think about coaching experiences over the years, and sometimes even as a coach, you'll make an assumption, you'll forget to tell someone something. And I was working with a woman who she came top three at professional national triathlon championships. This is back in the 90s. But she came from a run background. And one day we're talking, she's like, I always get so out of breath when I'm out there swimming. And I'm like, yeah, what's going on? And she goes, yeah, like I'm holding my breath to that next breath. And I'm like, wait, you don't exhale when your face is in the water? She's like, nobody ever told me that. So it's like, even at that level, sometimes you can miss a basic. And, so maybe what I'm trying to do is like normalize your questions and experiences, because we all have these funny learning experiences. We all have to be taught at some time. So breathing, yeah, first of all, when you roll and take a breath, you turn your shoulders a little bit and your head turns with your shoulders. And if you ever watch those Olympic swimmers, they almost can put their mouth sideways trying to create a little hole to get breath. You don't have to worry about that so much, but if you can try and keep, a quarter of your face in the water when you get that breath, that avoids you rotating too much. When we're first learning to swim, sometimes we really want to crank our whole head out of the water, make sure we get air. And then you get that breath in, use the big hole, get some more air in. And then as your head comes back down, you want to exhale while your face is in the water so that lungs are empty, so that when you go to get that next breath, you're ready to go. I've had athletes who are like, yeah, I'm always bilateral breathing, which means, breathing one side, stroke, 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 breathe the other side, stroke, stroke, stroke. That's a great skill to have. But if you need air, breathe every stroke, like just get the air. You'll even in Olympic finals, you'll see some of the distance swimmers, the best in the world, and they're breathing every stroke when they need to. Okay. And then, yeah, the other thing is just make sure that you take time to learn how to breathe out of both sides, because that can help. Whether it's waves or you're out in the open water and there's a bunch of people to your right and there's space to the left, maybe you want to breathe away from all the people as opposed to breathing into them. Thanks for the question.
What in regards to, for those of us in the colder climates right now,
Mhm.
um, what is sort of your best tip to have us get ready for open water swim, but we only have a pool available? What do you recommend there? Because a lot of athletes, especially in colder weather,
Mhm.
that 70.3 literally, and walking in race weekend will literally be the first time they see an open, they see a lake, lake, ocean, whatever it is that they're in.
100%. Yeah. Honestly, I probably could do an entire webinar on how to train in the pool for open water swim, but I'll give you a couple of broad strokes and a couple of things. I mentioned earlier getting your wetsuit on in the pool a few times as you're getting ready to go and do your first swim, so you can just get used to the comfort and the feel and the body position and all that. You do get a little bit more glide out of your wetsuit, which is nice. The other thing is practicing sighting. So you can be, swimming laps, and you can even like do 200s and time them like you would a normal interval. But you might say, okay, I'm going to twice a lap, I'm going to sight, and I'm going to pick a point to look at and sight off of along the way. And I'm going to see how my time compares when I'm sighting versus when I'm not sighting. Because that'll give you a good clue as to whether you're getting that head back down and getting into body position quickly, and how much you fatigue. You can also do some head up freestyle drill, where you basically are swimming with the water line at about your mouth and your head forward, just so you can get comfortable, and trying to do it relaxed versus scrambling, and learn how to keep your legs up a little bit more shallow when you do that. And one last one that I love to do is, if you have a couple of buddies, is you can get into one swim lane side by side by side, and you can do 25s where you all swim in close contact. And what I normally say is, start at 50% speed the first time. And as you all get comfortable, pick up the speed, switch your places around. So one of you can be in the middle and one of you can be on the outside, or two of you on the outside, as you go. And then you can practice things like, you can make a sandwich of the person in the middle on purpose, to get, just so that you can get used to being in around people. You can swim behind your friend and purposely touch their feet the whole way, just so you can learn to ignore that, as opposed to having it drive you crazy. And then you can practice swimming on the hip and bumping into legs and stuff like that too. So purposely, not hurtfully, but purposely have a little bit of contact so you can get used to just being in and around people so you're not as nervous on race day.
Okay.
All good?
We do have a few more questions, but I also want to let you, move forward with the presentation with everything else that you have.
Sure. Well, that was the end of the presentation, so that was really good timing. So yeah, let's take a few more questions then.
Okay, great. All right, and so I think this is going to be a question that I think is for everybody, because it's always about nutrition, and when we talk about racing, that's always the number one that people are worried about, and always the number one that we need to really be sure that's dialed in. So, with race morning, what is best to sort of, as you're waiting to get in the water and things, to take in some nutrition, and amounts and things like that based on your experience?
Sure. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to say to the person who asked this question is you better come to my talk in 2 weeks because we're going to talk about nutrition and pacing for 70.3, and we'll definitely do a deeper dive. But typically, as far as race morning breakfast, it's great to get it all down 2 hours at least before race starts and keeping it simple and familiar. Okay, so if you always have oatmeal before you train, have oatmeal. If you always have a bagel, have a bagel, have a banana. But keep it carb based, not excess amount of protein, not excess amount of fiber for the obvious reasons. And then have some energy drink with you in a bottle and just sip that energy drink over the next 2 hours at a moderate amount, just to make sure you stay fueled up until race start. And the last thing is a lot of athletes, just before the race starts, 10 minutes before, they like to take a gel with some water just so they can get that refueling process going. Because, when you're in the water, if you're out there for 45 minutes and then going through transition, you might be getting onto the bike and you're, almost an hour into your race of activity before you've had a chance to eat again. So that last gel, but this is all stuff you can totally practice as well too at home, just going to swim practice, like have your breakfast a little bit early and sip the bottle as you're going driving to the pool or whatever, and then have a gel 10 minutes before you get in and see how it feels in your stomach. Always make sure you drink a little bit of water with it though.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Wanted to ask you a little bit about a condition that actually affects many of us as we go in the water, but SIPE, and how triathletes need to be familiar with sort of with that and that condition, and sort of how they work through it in getting ready, and then showing up race weekend and race day, and having the race that they want to have.
Like sports psychology, is that what you mean, or getting psyched, or both?
Sorry, SIPE, SIPE. My fault. It's it's the sort of that it happens to a lot of triathletes, but basically uh it's an immersion issue in cold water, and it can occur with sort of surface swimming, so like tri swimming and whatnot. It happens quite a bit, um and they've
So
kind
this
of
is like
put it in.
that feeling of shock when you go into cold water. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and then it sends you into that what we've talked about earlier. So but you know what, that's fine. Um I know that I've seen it a lot
Again,
around
just
here.
like if you can get in the day before, even if it's really cold, like I think about oceanside sometimes early in the year, and it's like that ocean can be a little bit chilly. Like getting in the day before, it creates a familiarization in your body as well. So it's like you've gone through that process already of feeling the water. Sometimes it's torture the day before we get in, but it does make it better. And then getting some cold water on your face as well, just so you can get that initial feeling of shock out of the way before the race starts. It doesn't have to be like down by the ocean splashing yourself. Could even be from a bottle, but just getting a little bit of cold water on your face, and it takes that initial kind of shock feeling out when you get in the water. But and then again, you just got to breathe. Um, I've seen some athletes when it's like cold and you can't warm up, like they'll actually start the race and they'll just like swim head up for a while until the core temperature gets going, and then they'll get their face down too. So I hope those tips are helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. No, for sure. And again, everybody, please know that you can actually schedule some time with Lance and
Yeah.
really kind of dig into some one-on-one with him. Um, so this is one I have a problem with, drifting. What are your best insights to sort of minimize drifting and how to keep people from doing it? And it happens all the time, whether you're a first timer or seasoned vet. It happens. What do you think are the best tips to sort of help with that?
So by drifting, do you mean like the broken rudder effect where you're always going off course?
Yeah.
I mean, I've been doing this sport forever and I consistently go left. Yeah, definitely like sighting for sure. You can also in the pool every once in a while, like it's gonna sound funny, but every once in a while, like just close your eyes for a few strokes and actually practice moving and feeling the water and going straight in a more controlled environment, and you'll bang the ropes if you go off course. So that's a great way to learn too. But the primary thing is, this goes back to a sighting thing, is when you're practicing on your own or you're on race day, it's really great if you can find a bigger landmark, something significant, whether it's a building on the shore, um, a mountain peak off in the horizon or something like that, that's easy to pick up and get a quick little visual point on. And then the other thing I was saying too is that, especially in race day, like if you've got the opportunity to swim with a couple of people around you and beside you, like you're going to go pretty straight in that case, as long as you're peeking at them underwater, as opposed to, if you're just like swimming with your head down and taking breaths and not conscious of what's going around you, then you might start pinballing off people a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Personally, I needed that.
You're a drifter.
Yeah, unfortunately, it happens.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so answer this because you've worked with many athletes over many, many years. What
Mhm.
is the single kind of number one bad habit that you see for people for the swim portion um, of Ironman and 70.3s? What is the single most consistent thing that you see across the board that you have to work on with all of your athletes?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. Well, first of all, I was going to put out the one that probably everybody on this call could agree with, and that's like the chronic foot slapper, the person who loses limb control and is always like knocking feet. I mean, once in a while happens, but when it's every stroke, you're like, okay, come on, dude. So that's maybe like a bad etiquette habit. As far as yeah, so there's a lot of times where you see athletes who are actually quite good pool swimmers, and it doesn't translate to the open water. And I've said this a number of times through this talk, but oversighting and swimming with your head really forward and high, it does a couple of things. You're in that wetsuit, it flattens your stroke up, it drops your feet. Um, it interrupts your rhythm, your stroke rate rhythm. And so oversighting and keeping your head too high in open water to me is probably the most common easy fix for athletes.
Okay. All right. All right. So again, moving back to our colder weather climates,
Mhm.
what do you recommend in terms of wetsuit width, sort of across the board? Because you don't want to go too
Mhm.
thick, you don't want to go too light. There's some places where we might have races that are not even wetsuit legal. Sort of, what is
Mhm.
your take on sort of you know
Yeah.
that whole thing with wetsuit thickness, and then for folks that may not even want to wear a wetsuit when it is legal, or
Yeah.
in conditions
Sure.
they should.
Absolutely. Well, so first of all, wetsuit width is regulated, and I believe the body panel is 5 mils is the max. So if you buy any triathlon wetsuit right now, they're all manufactured to meet those regulations. I have seen things like swim skins and things like that that you can buy that are thinner, but they're not really so much made for racing as they are for people who um, want to get into maybe a cold pool with their team. You know how some people are chronically cold in the pool and always need to have that little extra layer of insulation. So that can be a neat tool for that. As I mentioned, wetsuits are faster. They are faster. And the heavier your legs are, usually the slower or further back you are on the swim, the more they help you. So if you're thinking about getting through the swim faster and it's legal, you should wear a wetsuit. That being said, if you're going to a warm climate, you're worried about overheating, you're not focused on your finish time, you feel comfortable being out there with a wetsuit, absolutely. You'll see people out there swimming without a wetsuit. And I know, in fact, in some of the races where it becomes wetsuit illegal, but they'll still let some athletes wear wetsuits because it's for safety. They just aren't able to rank or qualify for anything, but then they can still go out and use the wetsuit in the swim. I'm thinking that happened in Lake Placid one year. I was there. So yeah. Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, look, I'm going to kind of bring this to a close, but before I give Lance the final moment, I just want to give a few folks a couple of reminders. First, February 21st, as Lance mentioned, we are going to have a nutrition lunch and learn, in which he will definitely talk more about. I know we had the question about nutrition in the morning, and can I, sneak a quick gel if I'm doing if I take it with me in the water, things like that. So please, if you've signed up for this, you will probably be notified for that one as well. So I'd love to have you all there. And then we also want to thank everybody for bearing with us because we're using a brand new webinar service here, and we are also getting to know it. So we appreciate everybody's patience, and we saw all the questions that come through. We do apologize if we're not able, or if Lance was not able to get to all the questions, but please do note that his contact information is up, and you can definitely get a hold of him. All right, Lance, final question. And really it's going to be more of let everybody knows the final tip or trick that you have that they should think about as they prepare for their upcoming season for the swim.
For the swim, I think just there's all kinds of, one of the beautiful things about our sport 70.3 is there's so many great places you can travel to and enjoy a destination. And there's all kinds of choices as well too. So, if you're a strong swimmer and you like getting out in the ocean, find something in Florida or Southern California, or really maybe pick a course that suits your strengths. If you're novice and you are a little bit concerned about the swim, there's a number of downriver swims now too as well, which can help you along the way. There's the great one coming up in Oregon this summer, which is maybe one of the fastest swims in triathlon, and but it's just a nice way to get immersed into our awesome sport, give it a try, but maybe not have to, go to the outer limits of your skill set to get through it for the first time. But yeah, just try and switch your brain from I'm not a swimmer, I'm trying to survive, to I actually like going to the pool and I like swimming. That's my challenge to you.
All right, great. All right, everybody, thank you for joining us today. Lance, thank you for your time and giving everybody your knowledge. And we look forward to seeing you again here in a couple weeks, February 21st. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, everybody. Awesome being here today.